Welcome to the Three Things Podcast. I'm David Iglesias, Director of Wheaton Center for Faith, Politics, and Economics. You may be wondering why this podcast is called Three Things. You were probably taught by your parents, like I was, that it was impolite to talk to people about three things: religion, politics, and money. But what happens if your job is to talk about those three things? Well, join me for the next 25 minutes and let's find out. Welcome back to the second half of our interview with Silicon Valley tech pioneer Floyd Kvamme, where he tells us what was said to him in the East Room of the White House and also how his faith has impacted his work in both the business and political sectors.
Well, then that's a perfect segue to a quote, and I think you'll be able to identify who said this about you. He is an entrepreneur. He is a risk taker. He understands risk and reward. He knows the players, the people that can bring good, sound advice to this administration. Do you
George
know
W.
that?
Oh, yes, I remember. That was said in the East Room, actually, of the White House.
Yeah, so former President George W. Bush said that about you, which is really remarkable. Why do you
that was
think?
an exciting time also because I never had any connection with government. I mean, I came from what you could only call humble beginnings. I mean, I'm very, very thankful for my raising, but I tell the funny story that there was a picture made in the White House of me sitting next to the president in the cabinet room, one chair away from him, and if you remember, his chair is 4 inches higher than every other chair back in the room.
Yes.
I showed that to my mother, who was still living at the time, because when I was born, she wanted a girl, and the doctor, on my becoming up a boy, to be like with my brother, said, "Well, don't worry, he'll be president of the United States someday." And I said, "Well, Mom," I got within one chair. How's that?
Yeah, you were literally one chair away.
That's right.
That's great. What advice would you give a young person today who wants to go into the tech world? What should they look out for?
Well, the idea is very important. You know, what is it in the tech world that you want to do, and how new an idea is it? A lot of people think in terms of competing with existing ideas, and while those work sometimes and certainly work well, and sometimes, most times, a brand new idea that is the subject of some new vision that somebody has, whether you or another person has, as to how technology can be applied to solve a certain problem. Those are the good areas to get into, because new areas offer opportunity because they offer such growth. And if you're in an environment that's growing like crazy, you're going to be stretched, and you're going to show whether you can grow with it. And if you are paying attention and your eyes open and working hard, let's face it, that's part of the parameters here. You got to be frank about that, because there's not a lot of luck in tech investing. You have to work hard to make something happen is a key. But I really encourage people to look at things that are new, that you can understand, because you can then maybe understand them better than others. And that's what happened to me in semiconductors, because master's degrees in semiconductors in 1960 were hen's teeth. There virtually no school offered them. Syracuse did because GE Semiconductor was in town. Purdue did because the Naval Air Development Center was there, but that was it. And it gave me a real leg up to be in something brand new that most people didn't understand.
I'll say. So it sounds like it's extremely helpful to have a science, technology, engineering, or math background. But is there a place for somebody who does not have those qualifications?
Well, yeah, I would say so. I mean, Steve Jobs didn't have any of those. Steve just had an imagination for what he perceived to be a perfect product, and he was convinced of it. I see a lot of people with marketing types of backgrounds who say, hey, if somebody could make a product that did X, Y, Z, I can imagine a real market. I'm sure that some of the founders of, I mentioned Uber earlier, they probably weren't technology people, they were marketing people. Now, again, in the tech field, in the venture field, I would say that 80+% of the deals in the 1970s were technology oriented. I can do this magical thing, and that could become a market. Very few were market things, and almost none were what we call sales risk things, where you had a better restaurant. You know, that had all the data in the world about how restaurants grow, but they weren't very good investments for a venture, wanting venture kinds of returns. So, and that has switched from technology 80, marketing 20, sales 0, to technology now is probably less than 50% of the deals. Market, and now there's sales risk stuff because there's enough capital involved to make those kinds of major bets that you get in an Amazon.
I see. Do you see Silicon Valley maintaining its global leadership position for the foreseeable future? Or
I really think so. I mean, there obviously there's lots of issues in the Valley. There always are issues, but there's, you know, at one count, I don't know what the number is today, there were over 7,000 high-tech firms within a radius of about 20, 25 miles.
Oh my!
That's a lot of companies, a lot of people doing stuff that who knows even what it is, and you know, something's going to come out of that.
Well, I had no idea there was that concentration. I just have a few more questions. I'd like to switch gears a little bit. As you know, I'm the director for the Center for Faith, Politics, and Economics, and we're interested in all three. And I understand you're a practicing Christian. So could you share with us how your faith in Christ came about?
Sure. I was raised in a Christian home. My folks were very devout Christians. Like I said earlier, they were immigrants. They didn't do any schooling in this country at all, but they loved America, but they also loved God, and worshipped as Christians, and raised us that way. And my dad was just a hardworking guy. He was a carpenter, like I said, and gave us a real work ethic in our family. College was a unique thing. He had real confidence that wouldn't affect my faith. I mean, people say, well, did your folks go to college? Not only did my folks not go to college, I never knew a family where anybody went to college growing up. College was a totally foreign thing. And now that wasn't that unusual back in those days among the tradespeople, because we were a trades family. I knew a lot of plumbers and electricians and carpenters, mostly carpenters, because that's what my dad was. So I saw his faith in practice, and some of the fundamentals that you learn there. You know, the importance of telling the truth, for example. Yeah. There's no business principle that says it any better. To be a person of truth is fundamentally important in business. If you can't tell the truth, you're going to get in trouble. That's going to be serious trouble in time. So, you know, and then again, being in the tech world, I cannot personally understand how anybody cannot believe in God. Mm. The technology of how things work is so amazing, the way things fit together, the way a silicon wafer works to make those millions of parts work and sing together. To me, it's amazing, and I've always been amazed at it. I mean, you look at optical systems these days. You look at the ability to do this Zoom broadcast, and how your picture is in front of me 3,000 miles away, and is totally focused and all. That takes a lot of very interesting technology and understanding of that technology, and it's a marvel. And so to say that all just happens out of human brain, I can't buy it. So that has a lot to say, I think, in my regard, and that's always spoken to me.
Well, I think it's fascinating your father was a carpenter, because, as you know, the founder of the Christian faith was a carpenter for many years, and then he transitioned to ministry, full-time ministry. So is it true that you met your wife, Jean, at a Billy Graham crusade?
That was our first date. We had known each other since we were both 12.
Oh, my.
Because we went to the same church. But when Graham came to San Francisco in 1958, we went to a couple of meetings together.
That's remarkable. I think he made his name down the coast a little bit in LA in the late 1940s, so maybe 10 years before that. There's some really interesting documentaries about the beginning of the Graham ministry.
The folks at Wheaton were kind enough. The folks at Wheaton were kind enough one time to show me the data that they have at the center there, the Billy Graham Center, for the 1958 Crusade, and it brought back a lot of pleasant memories.
Oh, I bet. I'm sure his team was there. George Beverly Shea and Cliff Barrows, and I went to some of the Crusades as a kid. My mother was a Wheaton grad, and actually remembered seeing both Ruth Bell and Billy Graham dating.
Oh, really?
Back in the mid 1940s, yes.
Yeah, interesting.
So, can you share some of your memories about tensions between industry and your industry hat and your faith hat, and how did you manage it when there was a tension there?
Well, I can't say that I had a lot of those because, again, my upbringing was such that you do the best you can and then go home and get a good night's sleep, and you come back and you do it again tomorrow. I always tried to do the best I could, and if it didn't work out, it didn't work out. Go on to the next situation. Now, that's not to say that I didn't believe in what I used to call 19th hole selling, where you're trying to recover a situation because that's just good business. What I call win analysis, understanding why are people buying your product. Sometimes companies get lost in lost business reports. I contend that you can never know the full story why somebody didn't buy from you because they're not trying to build a relationship with you. They bought from somebody else. But you better understand why people who did buy from you bought from you, because that's the only way to truly serve them and serve that client. And so, just the fundamental aspect of how the world works and relationships as we talked about earlier, tells me that a Christian lifestyle, which places very high value on people. I just think it just popped into my head. People talk about their program being idiot proof. Mm-hmm. That was not allowed when I was in the room. Nobody is an idiot.
Right.
And particularly if they're my customer, they're clearly not idiots. My products don't have to be idiot proof. They have to be clearly explained, but you just don't use that kind of language when you're dealing with human beings. It's not proper, it's not right, and it's certainly not Christian.
Right. It sounds like you've got a lot of respect for your fellow man, for your fellow human.
Well, and how can you not? I mean, look at the ingenuity of what people are capable of doing, and they may not know it, but those are their God-given gifts, and it's pretty amazing.
Absolutely. So it sounds like your faith is part of your work DNA. Can you think of any particular major success or loss that you could say, I can see God's hand in this?
Well, it's a little bit more difficult. I have been so blessed. It's hard to name a place that you can specifically point out. I'm one of those people who never changed jobs of my own doing. I was always sought out by somebody else who wanted to build a team and wanted me part of it. And so I was fortunate enough to be asked those questions on a number of occasions, and they led to an interesting career. So I can't think of anything. I can't think of anything that fits in that specific question.
That's fair. How about any favorite scripture verses or favorite books that you would recommend to the listeners?
Well, the favorite book I'd recommend is called The Holy Bible. It's a pretty good guide. Favorite scriptures, of course, there are several, but the one I've always leaned on for a lot of years is what I call God's threefold plan for guidance. How do you get guidance from God? And the threefold plan is trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not into your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge Him, and what happens? He will direct your paths. That's guidance. And the thing that I always want to point out when I quote those is the second one is the tough one. Lean not into your own understanding.
Yes.
Sometimes you got it wrong, and that is human. It's human to err. Yeah, and you got to face those facts and go correct them, or do what needs to be done to fix that error or that leaning. But watch that one, because it's easy to get full of yourself, and that's not a good thing.
I think that's especially true if you're highly educated or you have a special skill in a certain area, and you're around a lot of other educated, smart people. And I think it's easy to lean to your own understanding and not be humble.
Yeah.
Have you accomplished what you've set out to accomplish in your career? So looking back as a young UC Berkeley grad and looking forward, I mean, are you pleased with your accomplishments?
I think about that I'm asked that on a number of occasions now that I'm older, of course. I realize I'm not getting old. I am old. Okay.
Yes.
I never had any particular plans. I just kind of, you can say that doesn't sound very logical, but I never had a plan to do this. I've had a fascinating life. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't change a minute of it. And there have been lots of ups, and there have been those downs that we run into. But God's been good, and so I can't say that I planned anything, though. My father planned it all.
Yes,
and that song goes.
That's right. No, I can relate to that. It seems like anytime I planned something, it wouldn't work out very well, or it'd be a disaster. But God still blessed me with unexpected opportunities. Like I'm talking to you. I mean, that's not something I could have envisioned just a few years ago. Just another couple of questions, and then we'll be done with this interview. So thank you for your patience. Are you a believer in the free market? And if so, why? And if not, why not?
I am a believer because, again, it goes back to the fact that, you take the American people, what are they real good at? It's called shopping. And they can assess things, and they know when they got something that is a good deal, and they tell their neighbor about it, or a bad deal, and they tell their neighbor about it. And the vendor thereof is either blessed or cursed by how that all works out. That's the marketplace at work. And, yes, you can fool some of the people some of the time, all the people some of the time, but not all the people all the time. And so I think that works well. And it troubles me when government tries to force markets by virtue of their activities, by favoring things or giving tax advantage to some things over other things, because I don't think the record of that is very good. Yeah. I may be wrong, but I don't think so. And I'm willing to trust the folks. I mean, take this time of COVID right now that we're dealing with right now in this whole area, and that pill that drug that's being talked about as a possible thing that's been used for malaria for all these years.
All right.
If you think about that, the FDA has a requirement to prove safety and efficacy. I'm opposed to the FDA proving efficacy. If it works, it's going to work as long as it's safe.
Right.
The so-called right to try, to me, makes an awful lot of sense. Because if you kept data on people that were right to try, you would learn a whole lot of things, I think, from the genetics of those people who are successful with that drug that you don't have the opportunity to know now. Now, again, I don't want to have a bunch of snake oil salesmen, but so there is that side of it. But safety, to me, is a governmental responsibility. Whether the market is proper for that thing or not, that's the buyer's, responsibility. And yes, there is a certain amount of buyer beware, but yes. The fact is that you got to trust the folks at the end of the day. to make the decisions. And if you're trying to do something that the folks aren't agreeing with, you're not going to win.
Well, that's right. Can you tell me what you believe the government's proper role is in regulation?
Do no harm.
Do no harm. That's.
I mean, to me, that it's the old medical piece. Encourage people to do their best. Encourage them to be fair dealings, fully disclosing what the properties are of things. And so I have no problem with labeling laws and those kinds of things. But you know, don't get involved where government shouldn't be involved in enforcing things on people. And there's lots of examples of legislation that has come into the tech industry that have been harmful in building companies, actually. But they are what they are. But I'm a free marketer.
Glad to hear that.
Well, I want to thank you for all the time you've taken with me, Floyd. And as is my practice, I always ask this question: is there anything else you would like to talk about that you and I have not covered?
Well, one thing we haven't covered is the importance of family in all this, because I was so busy. Thank the good Lord that I had my wife, Jean, by my side. We've been married now we're coming up on 61 years. But when I think about all the times that she has invested in this business, because the tech business is an international business. I've been in the Orient probably 60, 70 times, and those were weeks away. What did she do? She helped raise the kids, obviously, but then she also went out on her own. She started a business using the computers that I got from Apple in the meeting planning industry. Later, she got interested in horses. And started a second company helping people in the industry to learn how to use horses for special needs people. So she's had an incredible involvement with my background, and I didn't have to worry about things like the house. She's essentially an architect. She does interior design like no one I know. I don't even know where she learned it all. She doesn't know, but she picked it up. So anyway, it's an important part. I really feel sorry for guys that try to do business without having a solid home situation. And I think it's critical that be done. Obviously, faith and family are extremely important in your life. And if you got that right, you got a lot of things right.
Well, it sounds like you had a tremendous partner, a life partner, and what the military likes to call a force multiplier. That is one thing that makes a lot of other things possible. And it sounds like Jean acted as a force multiplier in your life and in your career.
No question about that, and continues to, by the way, with her Center for Special Needs Kids. She's gotten me to where I actually understand a few things about horses. Not nearly what she does, but I've enjoyed it also.
Well, that's great. And I just want to, again, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing that. You and I earlier talked about the importance of relationship. And after our relationship with God, having a spouse, having a wife that's always there for you, watching your back it's priceless. So I want to thank you for sharing that, Floyd.
You're very welcome. It's also fun watching her succeed in her businesses. It's a two-way street. It's been great.
Well, absolutely. So I'm sure you're providing support as well.
Try to.
All right. Well, again, I appreciate your time and your thoughts, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully live sometime here in September.
Okay, great. Good.
All right. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for doing this.
You're welcome.
You've been listening to a podcast from the Wheaton Center for Faith, Politics, and Economics. You can find us at wheaton.edu/FPE.